There was a man who once approached a Zen master, his eyes heavy with fatigue and his spirit weighed down by something invisible yet unbearably real. He said, "Master, why do I feel so exhausted even when I am surrounded by those I call family and friends?" The master did not respond with words. Instead, he handed the man an empty bowl and gestured for him to follow through the garden. At first, the bowl felt light in the man's hands. They walked in silence, birdsong floating gently through the air. Then the master began dropping small stones into the bowl. One by one, quietly, thoughtfully. With each step, the burden grew heavier. The man gritted his teeth, trying to hide the strain, determined to endure. But by the time they reached the farthest end of the garden, his arms trembled and the bowl felt impossible to carry. "This," the master finally said, "is what happens when you refuse to let go of relationships that no longer serve your growth. The weight doesn't arrive all at once. It builds gradually, and then one day, it crushes you." The truth was inescapable. We carry so much without realizing it. We think it's normal to feel drained after spending time with certain people. We convince ourselves that love must always include sacrifice, even when it means sacrificing ourselves. We stay loyal to habits, people, and bonds that only burden us, out of fear, out of obligation, out of a hope that maybe one day things will change. But Zen teaches otherwise. Attachment to that which no longer serves the soul is the root of suffering. It is better, as the Buddha once said, to walk alone than with those who hinder your path. But how do we know when it's time to let go? How do we distinguish between loyalty and self-neglect? The signs often whisper before they scream. Sometimes they come wrapped in fatigue, anxiety, restlessness. You begin to feel them, not in your head, but in your body, in your chest, your breath, your bones. And slowly the message becomes clear. You are not at peace here. And no matter how long you've known someone, how close they are in title or history, peace should never be negotiable. Imagine your life as a garden. Each plant within it represents a relationship. Some plants grow tall and bloom, offering shade, fruit, and beauty. Others become weeds, silent and unassuming at first, but slowly draining the soil of its richness, choking the life out of everything else. A friend or family member who constantly drains your energy is like that weed. They bring problems, never solutions. They take but rarely give. They leave you emotionally exhausted rather than refreshed. And you begin to realize that love without balance is not love, it's depletion. True companionship, Zen tells us, is like a still pond, calm, clear, and reflective. If someone consistently turns your waters murky, their presence is not a blessing. It is a disruption. No matter how long they have been in your life, no matter the shared memories or bloodlines, if they deplete your spirit instead of nourishing it, you must consider whether this relationship is worth carrying any longer. And then there are those who refuse to honor your boundaries. You set them hoping for respect, but instead you are mocked, dismissed, made to feel small. When you express hurt, you are told you are too sensitive. When you draw a line, they accuse you of being dramatic. But a Zen monk once reminded a student, when you step on a sharp stone, you instinctively pull your foot away. Why then do you let others wound your heart again and again? Boundaries are not walls built out of fear. They are the sacred walls of your inner temple, built to protect your peace. If someone continually storms those walls, they are not visitors. They are invaders. There are people who take endlessly and give nothing in return. They demand your time, your attention, your energy, then vanish when you are the one in need. You feel empty, but you keep giving. You tell yourself this is what love looks like. But love is not depletion. Zen teaches balance. Even the earth needs water to remain fertile. A relationship that only takes is like a well run dry. It cannot sustain life. And if you keep giving from an empty cup, you are not loving. You are eroding. And what of guilt? The invisible chain that keeps us shackled to those who harm us. You tell yourself, they raised me. We've been friends for years. I can't just walk away. But guilt is not love. Obligation is not connection. As one Zen master once said, a bird is not cruel for leaving the nest once it learns to fly. It is simply doing what nature asks. Relationships must evolve. Loyalty must never become a leash. And if someone is using your guilt to keep you stuck, they are not loving you. They are controlling you. Then there are those who bring out the worst in you. Around them, you become someone you barely recognize. Angry, defensive, bitter. A man once asked a Zen master why he felt so angry around certain people. The master said, "The wind does not create the scent of the flower. It merely carries what is already there. Some winds bring fragrance. Others bring decay. Choose wisely what winds you stand in." If someone amplifies your darkness instead of your light, their presence is not neutral. It is poison. Trust, once broken, leaves cracks that never fully disappear. You may glue the bowl back together, but the lines remain. A person who lies, manipulates, or repeatedly breaks their word is telling you something about their truth. Forgiveness, Zen teaches, does not mean reunion. You can forgive and still walk away. You can hold compassion and still protect yourself. A relationship without trust is like a boat with a hole. It will sink no matter how much effort you put into saving it. Then there are those who turn every joy into a competition, who secretly smile when you fail, who grow distant when you succeed. They don't celebrate you, they measure themselves against you. True companions, Zen reminds us, rejoice in your harvest, not your drought. They cheer when you rise. They do not see your success as their loss. A relationship built on comparison will always be one step away from resentment. Some people simply refuse to grow. They make the same mistakes, cause the same pain, and when you speak up, they make excuses. A river that does not flow becomes stagnant. So does a heart that resists growth. If someone refuses to evolve, they will ask you to remain small. They will ask you to accept behaviors that harm you. And Zen gently reminds us, you cannot change those who do not want to change. And you should never stay in a place where your spirit cannot grow. In the end, everything comes down to peace. When you are with them, are you calm or anxious? Settled or restless? The Buddha said, if a house is filled with smoke, it is unfit to live in. If a mind is filled with turmoil, it is unfit to stay in. Your peace is your compass, and if someone's presence consistently disturbs it, no history, no title, no shared blood can justify their continued place in your life. Letting go is not cruelty, it is clarity. It is the choice to put your energy where it can bloom. As a Zen master once said, not all storms come to destroy. Some come to clear the path. To walk away from what no longer nourishes you is not to hate, it is to honor. To release is not to abandon, it is to preserve. Letting go may feel like loss at first, but it is the beginning of space, of air, of breath, of life once again, finding its way back to you. You start to see that letting go isn't always about losing something. Sometimes it's about freeing space. Space that was once filled with anxiety, people-pleasing, tension, and silence so loud it echoed through your bones. There's a kind of silence that isn't peaceful at all, the kind that comes from holding in your truth for too long, the kind that makes you bite your tongue so often it begins to bleed. But Zen teaches us that silence is sacred only when it carries truth, not suppression. So when you start to feel your own silence betraying you, you know it's time. Time to speak, time to shift, time to release. And in releasing, you begin to breathe in ways you forgot were possible. Not the shallow breaths of survival, but the kind that reaches your core. Deep, expansive, cleansing. The kind of breath that doesn't ask for permission, doesn't apologize, doesn't shrink. Because when you begin to let go of what drains you, what lies to you, what distorts your sense of self, you make room. Room for laughter, for stillness, for joy, for the person you were always meant to become. You're not just removing people, you're unburdening your soul. And the lightness you feel isn't just emotional, it's spiritual. It's as if you've been walking through your life with stones in your shoes and you've finally taken them off. You begin to realize that not all love is good love. Some love is disguised as obligation, some love is conditional, given only when you perform, behave, or agree. Some love is a transaction, but real love, the kind that aligns with your spirit, never asks you to betray yourself. It doesn't ask you to shrink or stay silent or sacrifice your peace. It doesn't hold you hostage with guilt. Zen reminds us that real love flows. It is like water, flexible, nourishing, soft, but strong enough to carve through stone. If the love you are receiving feels like a prison, then it is not love. It is control in disguise. And you are no longer interested in playing along. You start paying attention to the way your body responds around certain people. Not just what they say, but how your stomach feels in their presence, how your breath changes, how your muscles tense. Your body knows. Long before your mind constructs logic to excuse the discomfort, your nervous system already senses the truth. You used to override these signs. You told yourself you were overreacting. You called it loyalty. But now you've learned that your body is your compass. And if someone makes you feel smaller every time they're near, if you feel drained instead of nourished, you listen. You trust your own signals. That trust is what you've been missing all along. You no longer feel the need to fight for a place in someone's life. You used to chase conversations, apologize for things that weren't your fault, overextend yourself just to maintain connections that barely held any mutual care. But you've outgrown that now. You understand that energy doesn't lie, that effort must be mutual, that if someone consistently shows you that your well-being is not their priority, you don't keep pouring from your cup to prove your love. You walk away, not with resentment, but with reverence for yourself, for your energy, for your future. You stop negotiating with people who only show up when it's convenient for them. You start showing up for yourself instead. You also stop measuring your worth by how long you can endure something. You were conditioned to believe that endurance was noble, that staying in unhealthy situations was loyalty. But endurance is not a virtue when it comes at the cost of your peace. You're allowed to outgrow spaces that no longer feel like home. You're allowed to say, "This doesn't feel right anymore." You're allowed to evolve beyond what you once accepted. Zen reminds us that everything changes. The seasons change. The tide shifts. So why not you? Why stay in a cycle that only recycles your pain? You start realizing that you've always had the power to choose your energy. Your peace is not dependent on who stays or leaves. Your peace lives in your choices, in your responses, in your boundaries, in your silence when silence is sacred, and your voice when it's time to speak. You don't let chaos enter your sanctuary anymore. And if it does, you don't let it stay. You treat your space, your mind, your heart like the sacred grounds they are. Only those who walk with respect are welcome, and those who don't, you bless them as they leave. No hard feelings, just clear energy. You begin to understand that some relationships don't end with explosions. They fade, quietly, slowly, through distance, missed calls, different values. And that too is okay. Not every ending has to be dramatic to be real. Sometimes letting go is simply choosing not to chase what isn't chasing you. You feel the disconnection like a gentle wind. It brushes past you, and then it's gone. And you don't resist it. You don't fight to keep something that's naturally dissolving. You say thank you for what it was, and you bow to what it will no longer be. You also stop confusing potential with reality. You used to stay in relationships because of what could be. You held on to glimpses, promises, dreams. You told yourself, if I just love them enough, they'll change. But now, you see clearly, potential is not enough. You don't build your life on maybe. You build it on presence, on patterns, on actions. You ask yourself, how do I feel now, not how could I feel one day? And that clarity changes everything. You don't fall for promises anymore. You honor your present, because the present is where peace lives. And perhaps one of the most powerful lessons of all, you begin to forgive, not for them, but for you. You stop holding anger like a badge. You stop carrying resentment like armor. You release, not because they deserve it, but because you do. Forgiveness doesn't mean reunion. It doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing your freedom over the burden of holding on to pain. It means saying, I no longer let what hurt me continue to define me. You forgive as an act of power, of sovereignty, of choosing to love your life more than you hate what happened. And that is the beginning of true liberation. You begin walking with more clarity, with more softness. You no longer force connections. You no longer chase closure. You no longer seek validation from those who cannot meet you where you are. You start showing up in your own life as your own advocate, your own sanctuary, your own truth. And even when it's lonely, you know, this path is yours, and you are walking it with your head held high, your heart open, and your soul finally at ease. There's a point where you stop asking why they did it, why they hurt you, why they left, why they didn't change. You stop searching for the perfect answer because you begin to understand that some people don't act from clarity. They act from their own unhealed wounds. Not everything has an explanation that will make the pain feel justified, and not everything broken can or should be fixed. What matters more now is how you respond, how you choose to meet the ache without abandoning yourself. Because the why will never be more powerful than the what you do with it. You stop seeking closure from people who can't even offer you honesty. You begin creating it for yourself, not by rewriting the past, but by choosing peace in the present. You learn that love and attachment are not the same. Love is expansive, freeing, patient. Attachment is anxious, restrictive, gripping. You used to confuse the two. You thought needing someone so badly that your world collapsed without them was love. But now you see clearly. Real love doesn't take your breath away, it deepens it. Real love doesn't keep you guessing, it calms the nervous system. Real love doesn't ask you to disappear, it invites you to be seen. You no longer crave the highs and lows of intensity. You want something steady, quiet, sacred. And if it doesn't come with peace, it's not the kind of love you're willing to accept anymore. You realize that not all connections are meant to last forever. Some people enter your life to show you something, awaken something, challenge something. Their role was never to stay, it was to catalyze. And when their time ends, it's not a failure. It's a cycle, a completion. Zen teaches us to see life in seasons. Just as a tree releases its leaves when autumn comes, you too must learn to release, even if it hurts, even if your heart still longs, even if you don't feel ready. The letting go is part of the path, and the space it leaves behind is not emptiness. It's sacred ground, ready to grow something new. You stop trying to convince people of your worth. You used to over-explain, overcompensate, beg for understanding. But now, you realize that those who cannot see your value will never be able to receive your depth. You are not here to be consumed. You are here to be cherished. You're not here to make someone see your light. You're here to shine, even if no one is clapping, even if no one stays. You stop waiting for someone to call you enough. You start calling yourself that, out loud, with conviction. Because if your love has to be earned, it's not love, it's performance. And you've retired from performing. You begin to grieve what could have been without getting stuck in it. You look at the potential, the dreams, the imagined futures, and you let yourself mourn them. Not because they were real, but because your heart believed in them. It's okay to grieve a version of someone that never showed up. It's okay to cry for the version of yourself you became in order to hold on. You feel the sorrow without letting it drown you. You name it, honor it, and let it move through. Because grief, when welcomed, becomes a river. It doesn't stay, it flows. And as it leaves, it clears the way for something purer, truth. You begin seeing boundaries as acts of love, not rejection. Not only for others, but for yourself. You set them not because you want to push people away, but because you want to invite in what is sacred, honest, mutual. You no longer keep doors open out of guilt. You no longer answer calls that shake your nervous system. You no longer respond to messages that don't feel safe. Your peace has become too valuable to gamble. And those who respect your boundaries, who honor your no, who celebrate your yes, those are the ones you keep close. Not the ones who guilt you into tolerance, but the ones who show up with respect and consistency. You stop tolerating inconsistency, the hot and cold, the mixed signals, the temporary affection that leaves more questions than comfort. You stop interpreting crumbs as love. You used to read into everything, every word, every silence, every shift in energy. You thought if you just understood them better, they would change. But now Now you see that love isn't meant to be decoded. It's meant to be felt. And if it confuses you more than it calms you, it's not your soul's home. You don't beg anymore. You don't explain what loyalty means. You simply walk away when clarity isn't matched. Not out of spite, but self-worth. You begin choosing peace over connection. You used to prioritize keeping people around, even if their presence came with chaos. You thought being alone was worse than being in pain. But now you know that solitude isn't suffering, it's serenity. You find joy in your own company. You laugh out loud at your own jokes. You take walks without anyone beside you and still feel full. You don't need someone to complete you. You are complete. And now anyone who enters your life must enhance your peace, not disturb it. You also stop mistaking drama for passion. The arguments, the push-pull, the emotional roller coasters, they once felt like fire. But now you crave warmth, not burns. You want a love that's safe, a connection that's steady. You want the kind of presence that makes you feel more at ease, not more alert. You don't want to fight to feel loved. You don't want to perform to be seen. You want something softer, something rooted, something real. And you know now that if love must be earned through pain, it's not love, it's trauma. You start to live more slowly, with more intention. You savor your meals. You look people in the eyes. You stop multitasking conversations. You give your full attention to the moment in front of you. And in doing so, life begins to feel richer. You're no longer racing through your days to get somewhere better. You're living now, fully, presently. And you realize this is what healing does. It brings you back to the now, to the breath, to the truth that this moment is enough. You begin to understand that true healing is not about fixing what's broken, but remembering what's always been whole. You're not creating a new version of yourself. You're peeling back the layers that were never yours. The expectations, the roles, the masks. Beneath it all is your essence, untouched, wise, powerful. And as you begin to touch that essence again, you feel a sense of homecoming, a sense that maybe you've been okay all along. You just needed to return. You walk away not with bitterness, but with grace. Not with resentment, but with clarity. You bless what was, even if it hurt. You forgive what didn't last, even if it broke you. Because you know now that every ending is also a beginning. And your story, it's just getting started. From here, you walk lighter, softer, truer. You walk as someone who no longer carries what doesn't belong. And in that space, life rushes in, not with noise, but with clarity, with peace, with a steady whisper that says, "You're exactly where you're meant to be." There comes a quiet turning point in your journey where your deepest question shifts from "how do I keep them?" to "how do I keep myself?" And that shift, subtle but seismic, begins to color every decision, every interaction, every relationship in your life. You stop bending just to be held. You stop shrinking to be liked. You stop negotiating the terms of your self-worth for the sake of closeness. Because you realize that keeping yourself intact, your values, your peace, your authenticity, is worth more than any connection that asks you to fracture for it. You've spent so long trying not to be abandoned that you forgot how often you were abandoning yourself. But now, the fear of losing someone pales in comparison to the pain of losing yourself again. And that changes everything. You begin to observe how deeply you've been conditioned to equate love with endurance. You were taught to stay, to fix, to try harder. That leaving meant failure, that walking away was weakness. But Zen whispers a different truth. It reminds you that the tree does not cling to its leaves when autumn arrives. It lets them go, gracefully, trustfully, knowing that new life will come in time. You begin to see that sometimes walking away is not the end of love. It's the fullest expression of it. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do, for yourself and for the other, is to release the grip and step away. Because not all love is meant to be a lifetime. Some love is a lesson, a mirror, a catalyst. And its job is complete the moment you begin to awaken. You notice the way clarity lives in the body before it ever lives in the mind. Your body always knew, in the way your heart sank in certain conversations, in the way you felt yourself dimming in their presence, in the tension that wrapped around your shoulders when you were trying too hard to be okay. You used to override those signals. You called it grace. You called it compromise. But what it really was self-abandonment dressed up in the name of peace. You understand now that true peace does not cost your inner voice. It does not ask you to pretend. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of truth. And when your truth is denied, your body feels the dissonance long before your mind can name it. You start listening to the quiet moments that once went ignored. The sigh you let out when you hang up the phone with someone who drains you. The anxiety that surfaces just before a conversation you've had too many times. The relief that washes over you when plans get canceled. You realize these aren't random emotions. They are maps, signals. And when you follow them, they lead you back to yourself, your needs, your desires, your truths. You begin to trust your discomfort, not as something to fix or fear, but as something to study, to understand. Because discomfort often means you're standing at the edge of your growth. You let go of the idea that closure requires a perfect conversation. You stop rehearsing what you would say if given the chance. You stop waiting for them to apologize, to see, to understand. You accept that some people will never own their part. Some truths will never be received. Some healing must happen without the final dialogue. And that's okay. Closure isn't something they give you. It's something you choose. You don't need their explanation to free yourself. You just need to decide that you're done carrying what they left behind. You give yourself the last word, not to prove anything, just to move forward, quietly, completely. You start valuing your emotional safety above all else. You don't stay where you feel constantly on edge. You don't keep explaining your boundaries to those who keep breaking them. You don't make excuses for people who make you question your worth. Emotional safety becomes your compass. If your nervous system feels like it's bracing around someone, that is information. If you can't relax into your own skin in their presence, that's not love, it's alarm. And you no longer ignore alarms. You no longer betray your own knowing. You choose relationships where your heart doesn't have to wear armor. You begin to detach with love, not bitterness. Not every departure has to be laced with resentment. You can let go and still hold gratitude. You can say goodbye and still wish them well. You don't need to vilify someone just to walk away. You simply honor the truth that your paths no longer align, that your healing requires space, that your growth cannot coexist with their patterns. And so, you release, with love, with softness, with the quiet conviction that sometimes leaving is an act of profound respect for what was and for what is becoming. You stop needing to explain yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You've learned that no amount of explanation can make someone see what they refuse to see. You stop exhausting your energy trying to justify your needs, your feelings, your choices. You start conserving that energy for yourself, for your healing, for your peace. And in doing so, you feel the return of something sacred, your power, your clarity, your time. You no longer plead to be heard. You speak, and if it is not received with respect, you step back. Because you've learned your truth is not up for debate. You also stop internalizing their inability to love you. You stop making it mean you're unworthy. You stop twisting yourself into someone more likable, more pleasing, more quiet. You see now that their failure to show up with love has more to do with their wounds than your worth. You understand that you can be everything right and still not be right for someone who isn't ready, and that is not your fault. That is not your burden. You release the shame. You lay it down, because it never belonged to you. It was theirs, projected onto you, and now you give it back. You begin loving yourself out loud, not in whispers, not as an afterthought, but as a priority. You dress in ways that feel like home to your soul. You speak with kindness to yourself even when you stumble. You move through your days asking, what do I need? Instead of what do they want? You nourish your body. You protect your energy. You rest without guilt. You take up space without apology. And this self-love, it doesn't roar. It doesn't demand. It simply becomes the quiet frequency of your being, steady, present, unshakable. And perhaps most importantly, you realize that your healing was never meant to make you harder. It was meant to return you to your softness, not a weakness. A softness that holds power, a softness that sets boundaries, a softness that knows when to stay and when to walk away. You don't have to become cold to protect your heart. You just have to become clear. And now that you are, now that you see, feel, and honor the truth within you, you become unstoppable in your quiet, grounded way. Because the peace you found is not fragile, it's rooted. And from that root, you rise, not in haste, but in grace. Not in vengeance, but in sovereignty. You begin to see solitude not as a punishment, but as a sanctuary. There was a time when being alone made you uneasy, when silence echoed too loudly and emptiness felt unbearable. But now the stillness feels like a soft blanket, the quiet like a familiar hum. You sit with yourself not because there's no one else, but because you've discovered the value of your own company. You find beauty in the rituals you once rushed through. The way your fingers curl around a warm cup of tea, the way your breath slows when no one is asking anything of you, the way your soul exhales when you're free from the weight of performing. You used to dread the alone hours. Now you welcome them, because in them, you hear the parts of you that were once drowned out by noise. And those parts, they have wisdom to share. You begin to realize that growth often looks like loss. The loss of illusions, the loss of comfort, the loss of identities you no longer need. And while it can feel like breaking, it's really becoming. Zen teaches that when the cup is full, nothing more can be poured in. So sometimes life must empty you out of people, roles, expectations, so that you can receive what is meant. You let go of the friendships that only reach for you in need, the roles that demanded your silence, the stories that told you love required sacrifice. You release, not in bitterness, but in readiness. You're no longer interested in clinging to what feels familiar, but false. You'd rather face the unknown with truth than stay where you no longer feel alive. You start to honor your energy like currency. You used to spend it carelessly, on conversations that left you hollow, on relationships that asked too much and gave too little, on obligations that drained your joy. But now you spend with intention. You choose carefully where you place your attention, your presence, your care. You don't respond to every message. You don't attend every gathering. You don't explain every decision. Your energy is sacred, and those who respect it, those who see its value without demanding it, those are the ones you invest in. The rest, you bless from afar. You begin embracing the in-between, the space after the letting go but before the becoming, the space where things feel unclear, unformed, uncertain. You used to rush through this place, desperate to find footing. But now you let it hold you. You let yourself be in the middle, because you understand that the cocoon is not confusion, it's transformation. This is where the old dissolves and the new begins to form, even if you can't see it yet. So you stay, you trust, you let the mystery do its work, and in time you will emerge. Not the same, but fuller, truer, realer. You stop mistaking being needed for being loved. You used to feel worthy only when you were fixing something, giving something, solving something. But that kind of love always came with a cost. Your exhaustion, your resentment, your diminishing joy. And now you know better. You want to be loved for who you are, not just for what you do. You want presence, not dependency. Partnership, not imbalance. You no longer carry relationships on your back. You walk beside those who walk beside you. And when they can't or won't, you don't chase. You rest, you recalibrate, you release. You also stop proving your goodness. You stop explaining your intentions to those determined to misunderstand you. You stop volunteering for redemption arcs and stories that aren't yours to fix. You let your actions speak. You let your energy lead. And if someone can't see your heart, you no longer hand it to them, hoping they'll notice. You hold it with tenderness. You give it to those who meet it with reverence. You're not here to be perfect. You're here to be real. And real doesn't always get applause, but it does bring peace. You begin to reparent yourself with care. You offer your inner child the things she never received: validation, comfort, protection. You talk to her when fear arises. You soothe her when old wounds open. You stop scolding her for being needy. You stop abandoning her when she's scared. You understand now that the version of you that shows up in moments of panic is not broken. She's just a child who needed love and didn't get it. And now that you see her clearly, you don't punish her anymore. You hold her close. You say, "I'm here now. I'm not leaving." And with each of those moments, the healing deepens, not through force, but through presence. You start seeing red flags not as puzzles to solve, but as signs to respect. You no longer turn discomfort into a project. You don't need to understand why someone is emotionally unavailable to justify staying. You don't turn their inconsistency into a lesson you must endure. You see the signs and you believe them, not because you're bitter, but because you've learned to honor what you feel. You don't call chaos chemistry. You don't confuse distance with mystery. You don't romanticize what hurts. You recognize it, and you walk away not because you don't care, but because you finally care about yourself more. You stop being addicted to potential. You don't fall in love with what could be. You don't stay because of the glimpses, the maybes, the someday versions of someone that only live in your imagination. You stay where you feel safe now, seen now, loved now. Potential can be beautiful, but it's not a foundation. You don't invest your heart in what you hope someone might become. You choose people who are showing up now, fully, honestly, willingly. And if they aren't, you don't wait. You wish them well and choose yourself. You start surrounding yourself with soft people, gentle souls who don't try to impress you, but who meet you in truth. People who make space for your silence, not just your stories. People who hold your grief as easily as your joy. You stop craving performance and start craving presence. Connection that feels like exhale, like home. You realize that being surrounded isn't the same as being seen. And now you only want the kind of love that doesn't require translation, that speaks your heart's language without needing subtitles. And perhaps most of all, you learn how to stay with yourself through every season. Not just the healed parts, not just the joyful moments, but the messy, the raw, the uncertain. You stop abandoning yourself when you're afraid. You stop shaming yourself when you regress. You meet yourself in the storm and say, "We're not running anymore." You stay, and in that staying, something sacred returns. Your trust in your own resilience, your belief in your own capacity, your commitment to your own heart. This is the revolution. This is the healing. Not becoming someone else, but becoming someone who never leaves themselves behind again. You begin to redefine what love means, not in theory, but in the way it lands in your body. Love, you now understand, is not the racing heartbeat of anxiety when someone's behavior leaves you guessing. It is not the butterflies born out of confusion or emotional inconsistency. You've been taught to associate chaos with passion and emotional turbulence with desire. But now love feels different. Love feels like a calm nervous system, like steady breath, like soft eyes and open hands. It feels like safety, not suspense. It feels like coming home to yourself, even when someone else is beside you. Love no longer feels like waiting for a text or second-guessing your worth. It feels like presence, clarity, a space where your truth doesn't have to be filtered to be received. You stop apologizing for how deeply you feel. You used to wish you could care less, love less, feel less. The world told you your tenderness was too much, your empathy overwhelming, your heart naive. But Zen reminds us, the softest things are often the strongest. Water carves through mountains, not with force, but with gentle persistence. And your sensitivity, once your shame, has become your compass. You feel the subtleties others miss. You hear what's not being said. You love with a depth that heals. You've stopped viewing that as a liability. You protect your softness now, not by hardening, but by being more discerning about who gets close enough to touch it. You begin to notice how much of your life was spent in performance. You smiled when you were breaking. You said yes when your whole body wanted to scream no. You played roles, the good one, the strong one, the funny one, all to feel safe, to be accepted, to not be abandoned. But you're tired now, tired of pretending, tired of twisting into someone else's version of palatable. So you let it fall away. You let the mask slip. You risk being misunderstood in order to be real. You say what you mean. You show what you feel. You cry when the tears rise and you don't rush to dry them. You don't hide your process anymore, because you know now that authenticity will cost you certain relationships, but it will give you yourself. You stop choosing people who need to be convinced to stay. You don't beg for effort. You don't chase after clarity. You don't overextend just to keep something that should be mutual. You let people walk, and you watch carefully who stays. And when someone does stay, not out of obligation, not because you begged, but because they choose to, you hold that lightly and with reverence, because love, real love, doesn't require convincing. It meets you as you are, where you are, willingly. And now that's the only kind of love you accept. You begin to find joy in the smallest of things, not as a distraction, but as a devotion. The way the sunlight filters through your window, the scent of tea as it steeps, the quiet rhythm of your feet on the ground as you walk alone. These moments, once overlooked, become sacred. You no longer wait for grand gestures to feel alive. You find holiness in the mundane. You realize that life is not found in the milestones, but in the micro moments. Those breaths between the noise where something ancient and familiar speaks through your skin, your eyes, your stillness. And you listen. You learn to be gentle with your past selves. You stop rolling your eyes at who you once were. You stop cringing at the choices you made when you didn't know better. You see her, scared, unsure, but trying, always trying. You thank her. You forgive her. You hold her hand instead of dragging her along in silence. Because your journey hasn't been linear. You've fallen forward and backward again and again. But you kept rising. You kept learning. And every version of you, even the ones who got it wrong, brought you here. To this softness, to this awareness, to this moment. And that deserves reverence, not ridicule. You let grief take its time. You stop demanding that healing be neat. You let your sorrow come and go as it pleases, like a tide you've stopped trying to control. Some mornings you wake with peace, and some nights you cry without knowing exactly why. You don't rush it anymore. You don't call it weakness. You don't analyze your sadness like a problem to be solved. You let it sit beside you. You pour it tea. You name it, but don't judge it. Because grief isn't linear. It's not something to fix. It's something to witness. And you become its witness, patient, present, and kind. You begin loving people without attachment. Not the kind of love that clings or begs or needs constant affirmation, but the kind of love that says, I see you and I release you. You love without possession. You love from a place of fullness, not lack. You no longer use love to fill a void. You offer it as a gift, not a demand. And if someone cannot meet you in that space, you don't try to pull them there. You let them be, and you let yourself be. And you discover that this kind of love, though quieter, is truer. It doesn't burn fast, it glows steadily. It's the kind of love that doesn't exhaust you. It expands you. You stop needing everyone to understand your choices. You once craved validation, needed people to nod along before you felt certain. But now you trust your own knowing. You take steps not because they're approved, but because they're aligned. You follow your intuition even when it makes no sense to others. You make decisions that feel right in your gut, even if no one claps. Because your life isn't a debate, it's a devotion, and your alignment isn't up for consensus, it's yours alone. You discover that peace isn't something you find outside, it's something you return to inside. Not when the chaos ends, but when your resistance to it softens. You realize that life will always offer uncertainty. People will disappoint. Plans will shift. But if you can root deeply enough in yourself, none of it shakes your core. You breathe, you return to presence, you stop trying to control what's never been yours to hold. And in that surrender, you feel lighter, not because the weight is gone, but because you're no longer carrying what was never yours. You begin to see your journey not as something to be proud of only when it's tidy, but as something sacred in every stage. You stop waiting for the polished version to celebrate yourself. You celebrate the rawness, the liminality, the courage it takes to keep going without a map. You see beauty in your questions, in your confusion, in your trying. And that trying, that's everything. That's the soul in motion. That's what makes your journey alive, real, and yours. And when you look back, not from regret but from reverence, you smile. Not because it was easy, but because you're still here. Still choosing truth. Still returning to love. Still becoming someone who no longer needs to perform, to beg, to ache quietly. Someone who stays, not in places, but in presence. Not in perfection, but in peace. Someone who knows at last that they are already whole. You begin to understand that healing doesn't mean you'll never feel pain again. It means you no longer let that pain dictate how you live. You no longer carry it like armor. You no longer use it as a filter for every new experience. You stop expecting the future to resemble the past. And when the pain does return, because sometimes it will, you don't spiral. You greet it, you hold it, you say, I know you, but I am not you. The difference now is not that you never fall. It's that you don't abandon yourself when you do. You no longer see your sensitivity as weakness. You see it as evidence that your heart is open, that despite everything, you're still here, still feeling, still believing in light. You stop running from your shadows. You used to chase light constantly, thinking darkness was something to fear, something to fix. But now you turn toward your shadow and sit with it. You begin to see that it holds your unmet needs, your unsaid truths, your unhealed memories. It's not there to destroy you. It's there to reveal what you've buried. So you stop hiding from your triggers. You stop shaming your old wounds. You let them speak. You listen, and in doing so, they soften. Because every part of you that you've ignored simply wanted your presence, and now that you've returned, nothing feels as scary. Not because the shadows disappeared, but because you've learned to walk with them in the light. You begin to fall in love with the slow unfolding of your own becoming. You no longer rush to get there, wherever there is. You let the process breathe. You trust the pauses. You stop measuring your progress by how visible it is. Some days growth is in the stillness, in the quiet choice to rest instead of perform, in the brave decision to feel instead of numb. You know now that healing doesn't always look like movement. Sometimes it's sitting in silence and deciding you are worthy, even without evidence. And that decision, made again and again, is what builds the life you're beginning to love. You find yourself more interested in peace than improving. You don't rush to correct people's perceptions anymore. You don't bend to make others more comfortable. You don't exhaust yourself just to be understood. There is a new quiet within you, an acceptance of the fact that not everyone will get it. Not everyone will get you. And that's okay. You used to twist yourself into clarity, trying to make your truth palatable.